I'm so excited to have the opportunity to introduce you to Renee Rosales. You see her right over there. She and I had a chance to get to know each other about a year or so ago. And what I have learned about Renee is that, first of all, she's incredible and she can teach us lots and lots and lots of stuff about neurodiversity. She's a seasoned educator and leader. She's the CEO of an organization called Thiara. She has um, been the founder and director for the Northern Arizona Distance Learning Program. I should have had that written down so I got it exactly right, but I hope I got it right. And she is actually one of our 6 coaches that we are pulling 6. I'll sometimes say DEI or DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. There's lots of different ways we can say all of this. Folks, where we're doing a program starting in August. She's going to be one of our coaches. I am curious. First of all, thank you all so much for having your cameras on. It's really nice to be with you. I have signed up for things like this before, and I'm like, I'm only going to half pay attention. And that's not what you're saying. If you have your cameras on, you're saying, I am fully paying attention. Thank you. It makes it so much better. I'm curious with your thumb, how comfortable, familiar, competent do you feel in the topic of neurodiversity? This is, I don't even know what that word is. This is, I could be teaching this and I'm just trying to learn more. Will you show us? Will you all show us where you think you are? And any answer is okay. We're taking a look around and we're seeing all these incredible faces. Kyle, where's your thumb? I'm looking for it. I'm looking. There we go. Okay, great, great, great. So there's a lot of folks like right in the middle. So without further ado, I would like to welcome you all to time for yourself, some me time. So grab your cocktail. Here's mine of chia seeds and collagen powder. Yes. And get ready to learn. Take notes if that's helpful for you. Get your questions ready. Renee Rosales, take it away.
Thank you, Julie, for the wonderful introduction. And I'm so excited to be here. I'm excited to turn your thumbs from here to here so that you guys all know a whole lot more about neurodiversity. And before I get started actually in the presentation, I want to share a little bit about my background because you're not going to care about what I know until you know why I care so much about this topic. I am an educator. I am also an entrepreneur and I am neurodivergent myself. I was diagnosed late in life around the age of 30 with ADHD and wish I had had the tools that I now have in my toolkit through adolescence, through childhood, and all of that. I was missing, I felt like literally, I described it to someone the other day as if my job was to clean a house and someone just gave me a pair of rubber gloves and that's all I had. That's how I felt about my ability to navigate the neurodiverse journey without the knowledge that I was ADHD prior. Once I had that knowledge and began incorporating different tools into my life to help me manage my neurodivergence better, it was a world of difference. It was like all of a sudden I had the vacuum, the dust, the feather duster, everything you could possibly imagine that I would need. And the toolkit keeps getting larger and larger. I have been an educator for over 25 years now, and I, as Julie mentioned, was the founder of 2 online schools, one in Northern Arizona and another in Marana. And I watched students struggle with these issues, many who were unidentified, that struggle to fit in a traditional environment. And that's why many of them chose to go to online school as an option. And so I saw this happening. And then I have a 14-year-old now. He is profoundly has a very complex neurodiverse profile. And I began that journey 14 years ago with him as a mother and wanted to do everything I could to create a world for him that's more embracing of neurodivergent individuals and that where we can share in the strengths of the neurodivergent community because they offer extraordinary strengths. So we're going to get right into it. I'm going to share the screen and I'm going to go back and forth because as much as I can let you see my face, I'm going to let you see my face. And we are going to start this presentation. So today is about cultivating neurodiversity in the workplace specifically. The term neurodiversity is supposed to be a term about inclusion, including all minds. The term neurodiversity was actually coined by a woman named Judy Singer, and she was an Australian sociologist who, in the 90s, refused to identify her neurodivergence. She was an autistic woman as as a disability. She, in fact, saw it as a naturally occurring neurological variant. So, this is where this term comes from, and it's supposed to encompass obviously a state of nature. It's an analytical tool for us to examine social engagement and interaction. And it's really about inclusion of all minds. Because when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, a lot of times we think in terms of just, race, ethnicity, gender, identity, and so forth. But we really, at the heart of it, we're talking about how our minds function differently, how we embrace our identity in different ways. So that's where the term came from. It is an umbrella term that's used at this point in time to encompass things like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, Tourette syndrome, blindness, any kind of visual impairment. Many people also incorporate mental health because these issues are identified by the DSM-5. It's a psychological evaluation tool that we utilize to actually categorize different issues. Some of the things we're going to talk about today aren't specifically, in fact, one of the things that is an overreaching characteristic of almost all neurodivergent individuals is sensory processing disorder or sensory integration disorder. That's not something that is identified on the DSM-5, if you're familiar with that, but it's something that's very commonly observed in almost all neurodivergent individuals. And we're going to dig into that in just a minute. But why does this matter? In terms of diversity and equity and inclusion, this matters because it's an issue of intersectional discrimination. When you think of neurodiversity, in fact, it's the only identifying factor that literally crosses every gender role, every ethnic role, you every role identity role you can possibly imagine. You can have ADHD or autism and be Black, Asian, gay. It doesn't matter. It's definitely an intersectional discrimination issue. Neurodiverse individuals may actually make up the largest minority population on the planet. That's a statistic directly from the World Health Organization. They think we know it's at least 20% of humanity, probably more like 23%. I would say we're looking at even larger numbers than that.
Can
When
I
you look
ask
at
a question, Renee?
yes,
I'm
yes,
curious.
certainly.
And anybody, you can always refrain from answering anything. You know that you hold your own boundaries. Who here is either neurodivergent or knows somebody who's neurodivergent? Can you give a hand if you feel comfortable? So I can see
Okay.
like just 8 people on my screen, and that looked like 100%. So we're talking about us and the people we know, right? I mean, it would
Yes.
be stunning if somebody didn't raise their hand, but I think that's really helpful for us to recognize. And I'm also curious, will people raise their hands again? Do you talk about this at work? Does this come up? Does this topic ever come up at work? We got a bunch of hands. Okay, and a bunch of non-hands. So interesting. Okay, thanks. Keep going, Renee.
Thank you so much for including the question because it's wonderful to see this is a huge issue that affects it affects all of us. It's likely about a quarter of the human population. So we're going to dive right into the next slide where we talk about the two common attributes. And many people don't discuss this. This is something, and I'm going to stop the share for a second. just so I can see all your faces. This is something we don't talk about. There are two common characteristics of almost all neurodiversity types share these common characteristics. You have pronounced variation in sensory processing issues and executive functioning skills. Now, as business individuals, you guys are probably very familiar with executive functioning skills. Some of you may not be as familiar as others. We're going to dive into that a little later in the presentation, but I think this is super important to know. I'm going to spend a little more time talking about sensory processing here, because people don't often recognize how much our sensory system is integrated with our emotional presence or our emotions. They're intrinsically tied. Oh, I lost my earbud, guys. Sorry. They're intrinsically tied together. So what we have a lot of times is you have somebody who might become overwhelmed in their sensory environment. And for example, I'm going to give you an example of perhaps an autistic person. They a lot of times have big issues with visual processing. And so if the environment that they're in is visually confusing, or there are patterns that they do not like, they could become very agitated and filled with anxiety. Then that anxiety and agitation is going to create a huge barrier in their ability to function at their best level in the work environment. So those sensory issues that a neurodivergent individual has are going to constantly be an impairment to their everyday, their ability to function in the work environment in a positive and fully present way. Um, I'm going to liken it. You guys can probably hear my voice is a little raspy. I've been struggling with a cold. So when you're struggling with a cold or you're getting over something, you are not maybe hearing quite as well as you were, or your sensory system is a little bit off. Imagine functioning in that place all the time, where you're constantly having to compensate because you're having to deal with something from your sensory arena that is very distracting. And so when I say pronounced variation, it's very dynamic. So if you imagine a person that's more neurotypical, and this is how they move through life, this line I'm making with my hand represents life. A more neurotypical person is going to manage life, and they'll have their ups and downs, and they'll undulate like this. A more neurodivergent person is going to have a much more spiky reaction or profile to events around them. So it's going to be much more dynamic, and they're going to need more tools in their toolkit, more accommodations to be able to effectively move forward in everyday social situations. Now, it can present as visual issues, it can be auditory, it can be tactile, it can be vestibular, your perioceptive, it could be your where you are in time and space. Your sensory system is extremely complex, and again, it affects that emotional place. So the less we are aware of it, the the less we have the ability to help these people positively engage in the environment. How many of you, I'm just going to ask for a raise of hands, how many of you guys have are aware of any kind of sensory safe zone in your workspace where you're at? Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. I see it. One hand up. That's awesome. So there were a couple hands, I think. Sensory safe zones are huge for people to have. And as far as being inviting and inclusive of a more neurodivergent population, having space for people where they can calm down, get in their sensory safe space before they go back and engage in the more traditional environment. I say also to most neurodivergent individuals, have your sensory sanctuary, have one at home. Many people don't always have a sensory sanctuary. You can make that in your car if you are going to work. And taking a time out there when you get overwhelmed is extremely important. So I'm going to talk to you about what I've done at Thiara to really help with I was looking for a how. You guys, we hear diversity, equity, inclusion. How many of you have heard all the do's and don'ts? Don't say this, do say this. This is how we should refer to people. This is how we shouldn't refer to people. A lot of us have heard the do's and don'ts, right? But we haven't necessarily heard the how. How do we bridge this gap? How do we communicate? How do we help these individuals be beyond just a sensory safe zone? How do we engage in a more positive way? Because we can't. You may know people because they've self identified, but in the workplace, we are not going to go asking, are you dyslexic? Are you ADHD? I see you struggling with, and the beautiful thing about this system that I've created is you don't have to use any don't have to identify anyone. It's literally a communication bridge. So we're going to go there next. Oh, sorry, I forgot to share my screen, guys. So let me get back to you. Um, Give me just a second here. I'm first going to go into the gifts of neurodiversity. And that to me is one of my favorite things to discuss, actually.
Renee, while you're finding that, can I make a comment and kind of pose a question?
Please do.
You know how sometimes people don't have a diagnosis of something, and so kind of say it lightly. For example, let me ask you this: Is a OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is that somebody who's neurodivergent?
Yes, that would be
And
somebody who's neurodivergent.
so people commonly will say, "Oh, I've got OCD, but don't have a diagnosis. Oh, that was so ADHD of me, or something, but don't have a diagnosis." Is that dismissive and inappropriate or not? And can you tell us maybe how to deal with that?
Certainly. First of all, I don't think that, in my opinion, anything that you can do to embrace who you are, whether you identify people who say, like, I have obsessive compulsive disorder, but they haven't officially been diagnosed. If they're struggling with those issues, if they're having those repetitive behaviors, there likely is something going on. It may not be OCD. It could possibly be, a lot of times OCD can get confused with high functioning autism. So many of these people can't afford a diagnosis. To go and get a diagnosis, you're talking about thousands of dollars. To get the best diagnosis, you may be looking at upwards of 5 grand just to get the test done. And the tests are not always completely, there's a level of variance. You're going to a doctor, but they don't take a picture of your brain. Now there are ways that you can get neurobiofeedback testing to be definitively diagnosed with certain things, because an ADHD brain will function a certain way, a dyslexic brain will function in certain ways. But oftentimes there's a certain level of subjectivity in terms of testing. They're looking for markers that are saying you are struggling to navigate your everyday, you have a deficiency in certain, your ability in that to navigate everyday activities in a certain way. Now, there's something that's really important to talk about here in terms of that, and that's where I was going with this slide, is that there is something called being double exceptional, meaning you have a disability, something we've coined historically as a disability like dyslexia, but you are also have an extraordinary gift in the form of perhaps visual spatial intelligence. That's an example of my son. His IQ is way above norm, and visual spatial intelligence, but his sound awareness IQ is 51, which is extremely low. So there's this extreme deficiency. With you find that that's very, very common in neurodivergent individuals, that they would have a very an area of extraordinary gift and an area of extraordinary weakness. These individuals are termed double exceptional. Now, they're not always identified, and you bring up a great point, Julie, because many of these individuals are gifted. Many and we forget that the gifted fall in the neurodivergent category. So you're talking about people that have an extraordinary ability, particularly in, like, I'm going to give the example of mathematics. My mother is on the spectrum. She was officially diagnosed way, way late in, like, at 67. Okay. 67 years old. The reason she was diagnosed is because of everything that we went through. She went ahead and paid for the testing because of the work that I've been doing in Theara, and she couldn't understand. She thought, well, I think I may be on the spectrum. It turns out that she was. She's also extraordinarily gifted with numbers, and has had a position as a high level accountant in a global Fortune 500 company for decades, and is extremely gifted in that ability, but it has caused her difficulties in that sensory processing arena in particular, and also in the arena of some executive functioning skills. And she used to be someone that would say exactly what you said. I think I'm OCD, but I'm not diagnosed. And so it ended up being that she didn't have OCD, that she was actually on the spectrum. So I hope that answers your question. But this is just a list of some of the gifts of neurodiversity that we don't often, um, aren't often aware of and don't often recognize. And if we can really tap into how to create space and environment for these individuals where they are in a sensory safe space, where they are growing in their executive functioning skills, we can really tap in to the strengths. For too long, that these individuals have been led according to their lack rather than strengths first. So I think it's super important to identify the strengths. And for everybody watching, this PowerPoint I wanted to make available to everybody so you can reference it. And then we're going to dig right into the bridge.
Perfect. And
So
as we go into the bridge, so that I'm real clear, so it's okay. It's not dismissive for me who hasn't been diagnosed for me to say something that feels kind of flippant, like, "Oh, my OCD is acting up so much that I have reorganized OCD so that it's." I've heard people say this CDO, right? So it's in alphabetical order. Like they're trying to make light of it, make a joke of it. It's okay. It's not dismissive. Yes.
I don't think it's dismissive. However, I would be sensitive to it because there are people that are going to be that may be on the spectrum, that may have struggled with a lot of discrimination associated to it, that may could take offense to it being seen as something comical or funny, or being made light of, because there is extraordinary discrimination experienced by, and I'll just use the example. I can't tell you how many times that, and my son is profoundly dyslexic. He's one of 2% that'll probably never comfortably eye read. He does ear reading. He's an AB student and does excellent, but he really struggles with eye reading. And people make this assumption, and because he does not look like he has a disability, he does not behave in a way, doesn't communicate in a way, he's highly intelligent. And I had some I he actually had an educator at one point that thought they were brand new. They had not gone over his IEP records yet, and they actually said in a meeting with me, I thought he was joking when he told me he was dyslexic, because it was a math teacher and he is really gifted in math. So he was saying, I'm having trouble reading the assignment here. I'm dyslexic. And she thought he was kidding. So, I mean, I think we need to be sensitive
Yeah.
and careful about what we say. If you don't have an official diagnosis, I wouldn't like just, shout, like, say things flippantly. However, I think it's normal to we have to learn to embrace this. And I personally wear my ADHD like a badge of honor. I'm glad that I talk about my sensory processing disorder not as a disorder. I talk about it as alternate sensory reality. I think I get to experience life a little bigger and fuller than maybe other people do because of that. So what I have done at Theara is I tried to create brain training tools for neurodivergent individuals to use when they are on sensory overload or in a difficult situation, and also for more neurotypical individuals to use in the same kind of situation. We all undulate with our emotions, we all struggle with things. And it's all about creating bridges to one another, because we do have that, and Julie's highlighting it. It's awkward sometimes communicating to somebody who is different, and we're talking about invisible things. You don't walk up to somebody and say, hey, are you on the spectrum? You might have this idea because perhaps they're showing stimming behaviors or they have an affect about them, but you're not going to be drawing that out. So how can you engage with a person in a positive way without having to even address those things necessarily or call stuff out? So this acronym in particular is build for bounty, relate through recognition, integrate for impact, develop through demonstration, gather for gain, and empower for efficacy. So I'm going to break these down one at a time. We're going to go into each one, but what I want you to be thinking about is how each of these tools you could utilize the bridge acronym. Okay, I'm realizing you recognize somebody in the workplace that you have historically had a struggle with communicating with. So I'm going to provide an example here, and I'm going to pull it off the screen share for a second and just talk to you about this for a minute. It was an employee that was in the workplace, one of the clients I was working with, and they were really struggling with a certain person at work. That person was really difficult to deal with. They were having a hard time with them, and they would point out all the little problems, all the little issues that they had at work. And the first person to, like, the individual would do a ton of work, they were doing cooperative jobs together, and they would do their part and turn it in, and this person would kind of be off the table when in terms of doing the work, but first on board in terms of criticizing. And so they identified that that person maybe something about them could have been neurodiverse. They obviously were struggling. This person was struggling in the work environment and everyday communications. So they utilized that kind of just the idea of the bridge without even knowing build for bounty, without even remembering all the different aspects, relate through recognition. They were just thinking, okay, I'm going to try to recognize the gifts that this person has. And they started complimenting them on a few things and engaging them with, like, sandwich psychology, complimenting them and saying, hey, I want to help you move forward in this arena. I notice you really do a great job at this thing. And that recognition of the work that person did immediately turned the relationship around, and they went from stopping the criticism constantly, and became somebody that was like automatically on board with this individual to help them do everything, and went above and beyond. And it was just simply by recognizing what the person did well. So the bridge acronym is just the kind of the think about the word. Even if you don't remember every piece of the acronym, you can think about any one of these words, and you're going to have these words, and kind of think about what is an action I could create to move forward in an effective way with this person based on just this word in particular. And we're going to go on to the next one, which is the build acronym. Here we go. So, and excuse me, because my voice is a little bit crazy right now.
We don't mind your voice. I like your voice.
Thank you.
As you're getting it prepped there, can everybody take a moment? So, Renee I've already taken a list of like 22 different terms. She just uses very eloquently as she's speaking. And I'm like, oh, that was a term. She just threw in there. That was a term. I hope, I know that that's how I learn well. I hope if that's how you learn well, you're also able to take some notes. Well, everybody, as she's starting to continue on with the build, will you put what has made an impact on you thus far? What stood out to you? What's been interesting? What's been something of note? While you're doing that, she'll keep going on, but take a moment to stop and pause to think what's made an impact. All right, Renee, take it back.
And I'm going to add to what Julie was saying. In a little bit, we're going to have you guys move to breakout rooms and talk about advantage actions, which I haven't gotten to yet. But just if one of these acronyms really jumps out at you, pick one that you like, because I'm going to ask you to do an activity with it and just jot it down. I'm going to keep them on the screen and not do the share for the rest of this, just so that we can kind of go through. So, because I want to make sure we have enough time for everything. And I want you to have a decent amount of time in your breakout rooms to really talk about things. And we're not ready to go there yet, Julie. I'll take you there when it's time. So the BUILD acronym is build bridges, not barriers. And so many times I think we get in those situations at work, or we get frustrated with somebody because they have this need to have it in a specific way. I don't know how many of you, and you can raise your hands, maybe in jobs where there's a lot of numbers going on. If you have positions in workspaces where there's any kind of an accounting firm, an IT firm, anything like that, you're likely to be experiencing a higher rate of neurodivergent population in those kind of careers. And so what you tend to see with a neurodivergent individual is they need a lot of structure and order. And when things aren't ordered or structured in the appropriate way for them, they tend to really struggle. So that's where that sensory stuff kicks up in their attitude, and it can present as being very off-putting. They can come off annoyed, they can come off irritable, and many of them, we're talking, are undiagnosed. I mean, if I wasn't diagnosed until I was almost 30. We have higher and higher rates of people being diagnosed, and because there's all different kinds of reasons. Some of it is we have better diagnostics, we have better tools to be able to identify, but some of it is it's happening at a greater rate. I think our use of technology has some impact on it. I'm not sure how, and I would never speak as an expert in that arena. But being aware that you want to be the bridge, not the barrier, and then you want to utilize your resources. What are the resources you have on your team? Is there somebody that's really great at some tasks that you need to get done? And can you pull somebody's voice in to the equation that you may have overlooked? Is there somebody that sits quiet in the corner that doesn't always engage? Perhaps they have exactly the mind that you need to solve a certain problem, but they're more isolated because they've experienced a lot of discrimination, and perhaps they are, on the spectrum, or perhaps they're even dyslexic. Many of these individuals are not confident to come out. That's one of the biggest problems we have in terms of business and engaging positively the neurodivergent population, is that you cannot ask someone, and they essentially have to self-identify. So creating space, and creating that space of bounty where people feel comfortable to identify and disclose their neurodivergence is huge. And they're going to feel more that way if they feel that you're reaching towards them, that you're building a bridge towards them, versus that bridge being falling apart or being broken in front of them, which has been a lot of the history for many neurodivergent individuals. Then inviting those creative solutions, listening intently. A lot of times we get set and on a targeted goal, and we don't really listen to all of the people in the room, or and giving people alternative ways to share information, not just verbally sharing it, but sharing it in writing, sharing ideas in writing, sharing ideas in different types of ways, and inviting all those different avenues into discussion. So it doesn't have to be, because there are going to be people that don't feel comfortable sharing verbally in a room because of their neurodiversity. And always directing things in a positive way. We want to lead strengths first and lead with optimism. Then relating with recognition. This is A huge one. It's one of my favorite. It's reciprocating, and I always talk about the ABCs of neurodiversity. Be aware, be brave, meaning be bold. Don't be afraid to reach out to that person that is different in some sort of way, or that you may have had a challenge with in the past, and be curious. The easiest way to do this is asking questions. When you ask questions to individuals, you demonstrate value to them. So that person in the room, in your office space, that person that you really want to lead in a positive way, ask them engaging questions about their interests, about what they did over the weekend. The stuff that they are doing is usually stuff they enjoy, and it's usually something they do well, so you'll find out more about them that way. And when I say exchange ethically, we want to do that with sensitivity, like Julie discussed. We want to try to be as sensitive as we can to individuals in the room. And then when I say light the way, that's another acronym that we won't get into. I don't want to put you in acronym soup. But when we say light the way, I literally mean invite the light in every space. Try to be listening and inviting positivity and guiding people in a positive way. If you're leading people in a positive direction, they will likely follow in that positive way. We know about this. We know about mood contagion, that these things happen when you walk into a room and you're in a bad mood. It's going to have an effect on everybody else there. And then acknowledge that diversity. There are different people in your room. We work together and translate inclusively, and then engage. And so, as you're thinking about these things, I want you to think about actions you could put next to these. I utilize the term advantage actions. We're going to get into that a little bit more here in the next few slides. Integrate for impact. So, this is one of my favorite. Where the neurodiverse really shine is in innovation, because a lot of times they're able to they have a different vantage point, a very divergent perspective of the world, and that makes it easier for them sometimes to solve problems that some of the rest of us just are stuck with, those enigmas. They're able to find solutions that we don't normally have. I don't know if you're aware, but Ernst & Young has, I think, now over 18 centers, their neurodiversity centers of excellence that they have at Ernst & Young. And they literally have gone all over the world in search of neurodivergent talent, because what they learned is that many of these individuals have this incredible gift to be able to identify coding issues and anomalies and problems. And they have foregone the traditional recruiting practices and pulled these people in to bring about innovation and help master concepts. So the impact is, we want to have a positive impact. So the more that we can inclusively engage neurodivergent population, the more you're going to be able to innovate, the better you're going to be able to master. You're going to be able to prepare the whole in a more profound way. And then act. We have to move forward in this. We can't just sit back and like watch the person in the room that's struggling to socially engage and let them be, and just leave them be. We need to reach towards them. And that's part of that is covering. When I say cover, I'm meaning be sensitive, cover them, think about that individual when you're, I mean, you don't want that person that may be being neglected as far as socially in the work environment, that may sit by themselves. They may not even identify as I'm neglected, or they might not identify discrimination, but they other people don't naturally just approach them because they kind of have a wall or a barrier up. If you engage and you're protective of them in the work environment, particularly in a social arena, you have no idea how much that can shift their whole attitude. What I have found is that neurodivergent individuals are some of the most loyal employees that you will ever find, when they feel appropriately nurtured and that they're taken care of and safe in their environment. And that they feel that they're valued, they're going to go out of their way. And so I literally believe that that curious piece, what I talked about before, demonstrating value through your curiosity in these individuals that you might have felt apprehensive about engaging before, just ask them questions, simple questions, and about stuff they enjoy. Start there and then build from that. And then you create the space where you can teach one another new ways to grow and move forward. I can't tell you enough. I can't stress enough the importance of the curiosity piece. And then develop through demonstration. And here's where we start to touch on the advantage actions. I designed the acronyms with this concept that you could individually create advantage actions for your specific workplace, where you took these concepts and then you said, okay, we're going to develop through demonstration by creating a more positive environment in our workspace. So maybe we're going to choose a color that we all enjoy. Let's say it's the color orange. I see Julie's got some orange in her background, and that's actually my favorite color. So we're going to pick orange. We're going to buy all orange Post-it notes, and we're going to pick orange. We're going to look for posters that are positive, that have orange in them. We're going to put them in every room in our office. Every one of us is going to have a stack of orange Post-it notes, and we're going to pass positive messages to one another. So you create this advantage action that inspires positivity in your workplace. Okay, so you're going to start creating some kind of advantage action based on the acronym. I'm going to develop optimism in my workplace, and I'm going to do it by demonstrating this through my orange Post-it notes. And we're going to all choose this color orange, and we're going to invite positivity into our space. So they're designed to keep in mind those sensory processing and executive functioning skills. So when you're thinking of executive functioning skills, your executive functioning skills go down the drain when we're in a bad mood, when we're angry, when we're frustrated. We're not able to organize things as well. We're not able to be as flexible when we're in a bad space. So bringing positivity is improving that executive functioning piece, and it's also helping with that sensory processing, because you're able to give someone, okay, I see this orange color and I'm going to recognize that that's joy to me, that's optimism to me. So I'm going to hold on to that in this moment right now when I just got this negative email coming in from somebody else, and reminding yourself of that. And then that effectively helps you move forward, and you're engaging that visual part of your sensory system and helping you move forward in that way. So that's what you're doing with these advantage actions. And we're going to move on to the last one. No, the next one is gather for gain before we move to our E. And gathering for gain is you're going to guide through advantage actions and identify needed supports. So you can look at your work arena, you can identify some needed supports. Perhaps you know that space better than anybody else. Who do you need to maybe draw out? Can you see somebody that might be struggling with some type of neurodiversity related issue? Don't even think of it like neurodiversity related issue. Think of it as, are they struggling maybe with the sensory processing thing? Do they have difficulty with a certain aspect of executive functioning? And then work on developing those advantage actions that could improve that, not just for that individual, but for the entire team. Because what you'll find is, if it's improving with one person, it's with an individual, it's going to be improving for everyone. You're going to see that. That's why the THROA acronyms work for neurodivergent and neurotypical people, one and the same, because they're focusing on doing the right way. One of the interesting things I remember, I'm recalling as I'm talking to you guys right now, is dyslexia. We knew how to teach dyslexics how to read. The Orton Gillingham method of reading was created back in the early 1900s, the same time that they mandated compulsory education in the United States. So we did not incorporate that reading style into our education system but we knew that everyone would be able to learn to read that way. It was a little bit harder to do. And so they didn't adapt all of our reading education that way because it was more challenging. I'm urging you to go through these acronyms and move people forward with those advantage actions, because what you will find is it builds this bridge, like one brick at a time. One person's doing something, taking one little action, and it's like a domino effect. It just keeps going and going and going. And so then finally we're into that last E, which is empower for efficacy. So for those of you that weren't familiar, this is a two slides on this part. Executive functioning involves impulse control, emotional control, flexible thinking, working memory, self-monitoring, planning, prioritizing, task initiation, organization, the things that make us good at work, right? When that crumbles, when that falls apart, we're not excelling most of the time. So then the next part of that is that sensory processing piece that we discussed. And that's just really your ability to organize sensory information. So I want to give you one last thing before we go into breakout rooms. And we're going to go into breakout rooms in just a second. I'm going to stop sharing the screen because I want to talk to you about really quickly. The issue with sensory processing is, if you go back, the original Jean Ayres is the mother of sensory integration. And basically she says it is like with sensory processing disorder, it's like a traffic jam of your sensory system. And that's essentially what's happening for these individuals. That's why you see meltdowns. That's why you see an autistic person really struggling, doing a lot of stemming behaviors. That's why the ADHD person goes off in a meeting crazy, or things like that happen, because they're on sensory overload and they're having a traffic jam. So the way to stop the traffic jam is to focus you on one sensory thing at a time. So one of the things I do with my ADHD is I wear sensory jewelry, and try to focus myself there. You can focus yourself on a specific thing, like I talked about that color orange. Um, Finding something, you might have a weighted blanket that somebody keeps by their desk. They may need to wear headphones, but creating that space for them where they can get out of that traffic jam zone, because you're not going to be able to function in that traffic jam zone. So as you're thinking about this, I'm going to have Julie. I want you to think about, I'm hoping that some of you took some notes and can remember some of one of the acronyms, even if you just remember one thing, like build for bounty, relate through recognition. I would like for you to go into breakout right now and come up with some advantage actions that you could utilize in the workspace, um, in your specific arena, that could help potentially advance your team.
Okay, and before you do that, I'm gonna just share this with you. Who uses Chat GPT on the regular? Anybody? Julie Dasso? No? What? Okay, the reason I ask you that is because I just put into Chat GPT. I asked that question, right? I said, right up here, what are some advantage actions to support the neurodiverse? And there are so many things in here that you've just mentioned today, Renee. I am so about what's the concrete action? Like, what can I do now? What's a specific thing? And I feel like you've talked a bunch about this, right? So I just want to give this to people too. Right here, you just mentioned that noise canceling headphones, quiet workspaces, um, scrolling through even sensitivity training. We go down to education. You talked about IEPs. You talked about fidget tools, like you just talked about your jewelry. You talked about weighted blankets. There it is. There's quiet spaces. The reason I'm just sharing this is because today you get like an hour's worth of info and you want more, right? Because you're avid learners. That's why you're here. So you can keep looking for stuff. This one, I'm like, this is for me. I need the text and the visual, right? And I really like to see how there are so many different ideas. So I'm going to stop my share there. I'm going to put you into the breakout rooms. And Renee, how long in there?
I think let's give him, I'm checking on my time. Let's give him 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
And then I'll wrap up with some other ideas.
Great. So I feel like first feel free to say hi to the people. If you're like, hi, my old friend, or hi, I've never met you before. People are curious where you work, who you are, say hi. It also could be interesting for, Renee mentioned earlier, self-disclosure. Feel free to self-disclose whatever you want. There is never any pressure. But if you're like, this is why I'm here, or this is what I want to learn, or this is what I'm gaining, feel free to ask questions into the group, and extra super bonus points for, remembering acronyms and bringing them in and sharing about that. But make it count. These are people who also care about the human experience and are taking time out of their insanely messy day, right, Shannon, Judy? Your busy day to talk with people who care about people. So let's make it count. So we're going to go in there for 5 minutes. No need to feel awkward. Just say hi and then get to it. Here we go.
Can you repeat or type the prompt one more time?
Oh, you're making me walk the talk. What is the prompt? It's like, have a conversation. Yeah, let me see if I can get that.
Just come up with some advantage actions for your specific to your workspace based on anything we've discussed today.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then I just typed it. What are some actions that could work in your workspace? Great. And Renee, if you want to, I like to just pop in. I turn off. Oh, yep.
Okay, so I'm thinking everybody's coming back, and I hope it was great in the breakout rooms. I enjoyed my experience there. One of the things that I want to talk about before we move forward with the wrap up at the end of the slide, because I've got a hard stop here in 5 minutes, but I really want to touch base on the two basic human needs that we all have. We've all heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and they're basically that you have to feel safe, and along and then the next one is feeling accepted. And for neurodivergent individuals, from the time they were very, very young, particularly if their neurodivergent identity is really complex. For example, my son, he had a childhood apraxia of speech, which meant he really couldn't, he was missing the motor planning tool to be able to speak. And so he didn't have words until he was almost 4, but he had understanding. He understood everything that was going on around him. He was also visually impaired, and then ended up having the dyslexia piece happen too. But every arena you would watch, and he felt socially awkward. He was disconnected. So he didn't feel that feeling of acceptance. And it was from the earliest, I mean, I remember going out and picking him up because he went to the daycare 2 days a week, and I would go pick him up at the daycare, and he was in the corner by himself playing in the sandbox or playing with some toys. And so even though they can't articulate it or don't know, they are lacking that feeling of acceptance and belonging. And all of us need that feeling of safety. All of us need that feeling of acceptance and belonging. And then there are two basic primary human fears. The Tony Robbins Research Foundation talks about this, and it's the fear of being unloved and the fear of being not enough. And so I guess the biggest takeaway, and I'm going to roll through some ideas that you can look up on ChatGPT. You can use AI to find all kinds of ideas out and be very specific in your questions about how to do this. But before we go into that, the goal I want you to leave when you leave this presentation today, I want you to think about how can I create space in my work environment to help people feel like they are enough and like they are accepted. Because once we get people in that space, then the whole world opens up as far as possibility, as far as innovation and creation, because people are willing to pour their 100% in when they feel truly valued. And so I hope Julie's going to make this PowerPoint available to every single one of you. And I hope really the acronyms are just there as an inspiration for you to build your own advantage actions in your own way in the workplace. But ultimately, it's for everyone to have that feeling that they feel safe and they feel like they belong. And then I'm going to go back here and share my screen and get you those last ideas that because I want you to for sure be able to walk away with some ideas on exactly how you could do this. I'm sure you shared some fun ones, and then maybe we'll have a way to potentially even talk about some of the ideas that you came up with if we have any more. Well, we only have 2 minutes, so I'm going to roll through this really fast. So for Build for Bounty, I just wrote up, encourage team members to share their unique strengths and skills through collaborative projects, which you guys, I'm sure, have all done, but skills sharing sessions. That was something that, you know, we don't always think about, having a sharing session to share what our unique skills and differences are. So that's something creative that you could do there. The next idea for the bridge solution for relate through recognition is implement a recognition program, and where individuals are recognized for their accomplishments and their contributions. And I say in here, of neurodiverse team members, I would not just be recognizing neurodivergent team members. And I want to be really clear in how I communicate with this. Make it a recognition program for everyone, but make sure you don't leave those individuals out. Sometimes they're not the first to shout out, but recognizing something that they are doing really, really well and having that in mind, particularly if you have an idea or a suspicion that someone may be neurodivergent on your team. And the way you do that, this does not have to be a program that you're sharing out loud. We're having this recognition program. You could literally just send out little personalized notes to people, shout outs during meetings, or awards for exceptional work. And then for our Integrate for Impact, create those opportunities for neurodiverse employees, or for our employees, period, to work in cross-functional teams where your unique perspectives can contribute to different solutions and problem solving. We don't always think about changing our teams up and working cross-functionally. And then for develop through demonstration, offer training and development programs that are accessible and tailored to learning styles of neurodiverse employees. Sometimes you need to bring in some accommodations. We don't always know. I know a ton of dyslexic individuals that refuse to identify their dyslexia at work because they're afraid they're going to be discriminated against. So if somebody is comfortable enough sharing with you that they are dyslexic, definitely provide them tools, make those accommodations, like pick up the phone and call them versus sending them, something via email or text, things like that you can do, or offer different, there's lots of innovative assessment tools, innovative tools now as far as that you can employ, I'm sorry, I had a loss for words there for a second, in the work environment, and utilize the wonderful innovations of technology to change things around. Speech to text, text to speech, all those tools are great. I mean, my son's not gonna have any problems, even though eye reading is very difficult for him still because of our technology and use of AI. Gather for gain, organize regular networking events, workshops, lunch and learns like you guys are doing right now, focused on neurodiversity inclusion. You could even take one of the acronyms, post it on the board, talk about it at your work, put it up in the lunchroom somewhere and have a discussion about it, things like that, to create that environment and community of mutual understanding. And then finally, empower for efficacy, create those sensory safe zones, guys. If you don't have one in your office already, I would strongly encourage you to establish that, work with your team members to get that done. It can be something simple, or even if it's not possible because of space, allow for those break times so someone can go on a walk, go to their car, get in their sensory safe space so they can come back and actually function and do their best in the work environment. And that's pretty much it. I'm passing the mic. I went over. Sorry, Julie. I'm
That's
passing the mic back to
okay.
Julie.
Thank you, Renee. Can we all unmute for a second and say thanks to Renee? Hit it.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Renee.
you, Renee.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Renee.
Thank you, guys. It was wonderful to be here.
Awesome. I went to a wedding this weekend. I was in Salt Lake City. Anyone been to Salt Lake City? I hadn't spent any time there. And there's a woman, maybe 24 years old or so. If you could stop sharing your screen, that would be great. And she was wearing noise canceling headphones. And I was like, first of all, I love that she's doing that, because then I totally know what that message is, right? None of us have to guess. Does that mean, does she want to talk or not talk? I was like, yeah, brilliant. And then I thought, how sometimes employers are like, what holiday gift should we give out to everybody? I've been given weird things like a scale. I was like, what is the message that my employer is sharing with all of us by all of us getting a scale? I still remember that. I was thinking, noise canceling headphones, right? That would be a great gift to give as groups, to say what we support around here is that you can check out sometimes, especially in those environments where it's a group office space. Those do me in. But I thought about that. I also, Renee, from what you just were talking about, I feel like self-disclosure is such a human superpower. And I was thinking, like, if I was to get together with a group and wanting to discuss neurodiversity, I would first think about what could I share about myself. And the first thing that came to mind for me is I have 3 siblings, 2 are halves, 1's a whole. So there's 4 of us, and all 3 of them have an ADHD diagnosis. I don't have an ADHD diagnosis, but I've never been tested, and sometimes I often wonder. That might be something I would lead with, to be like, here's a little bit of something about me. With all of that, you all love to learn, right? If you've still got a question, you're like, no, I wanted her to talk about this. I need help now. Put it in the chat right now. Don't be shy. Get real specific. Ask your question. Often when we ask a question, we get so clear on what we want to know that the answer is so much easier to find. So just do it while I'm talking. Tune me out. Put on your noise canceling headphones and just do that. But I also want to share with you an opportunity. Good. And Renee, if you want to start typing in answers, if anything comes to mind as people are putting them in, I want to share with you, we have a program that's coming up starting in August. Some of you have been part of our remote group coaching intensive. It's a 5-month program. It's group coaching. Doreen's been a part. Am I allowed to self-disclose? These aren't secrets. I'm not telling what you've said in them. Marissa, you've been a part. Allison, you've been a part. Yvonne, you've been a part. Anne Marie, you've been a part. I'm sure I'm leaving people out, and I love you. But I want to show you what's up and coming because I am so excited about this one. So first of all, you can see there's a bunch of us. Renee is one of the coaches. I'm one of the coaches, and so is Jenny, Dylan, Jeff, and Judy. Some of you know Judy, some of you know Jeff, and I bet many of you don't know Jenny and Dylan. But what this one is about, it's a deep dive in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And it's for people who love to learn and want to learn more and might even want to bring stuff back to your workplace. Here are the topics. So it's a good old combo of stuff. It's not just one. What I've found when I'm learning about DEI stuff is it's often super generic or super specific. Like today, we're just talking about race in the workplace, which is even a challenging thing to do in a short amount of time. So we've got all the not all the topics, but you can see pronouns and gender, neurodiversity, race and ethnicity, age and generations in the workplace. So we'll have these group coaching cohorts. And then we also are even going to have one-on-one coaching included with one of these folks that you pick. So there's lots of good stuff. I guess I should put this link in the chat. I would love to see you all there, and I would love to answer any questions that any of you have about this. I actually think a bunch of you are going to be in it. Who's going to be in it? You already know. This is a lie. Oh, how interesting. Maybe it's not yet revealed. Maybe it's not yet revealed. Because I know one of you has asked that a lot of you could be in it. Anyway, sorry if I'm telling secrets that I'm not supposed to tell. Surprise. Anyway, okay, good. We got questions going in there. As we are starting to wrap this up, could I ask 2 folks to share what was a takeaway or something that made an impact on you by spending this little hour-ish of time with us? What made an impact? Would 2 folks be willing to volunteer? You know I'm 4 seconds away from picking. Good. Marissa's one, and who's going to go after Marissa? Wonderful, Kyle. Marissa, take it away.
Oh, no. Okay, so I was going to share Kyle's takeaway from our group session because I thought it was very relevant.
Perfect. Do it. You're first. You get to do
just
anything.
Thunder. No, he made a very relevant comment, so you can expand on it, Kyle. That a lot of these tools and tactics, it feels very overwhelming, maybe, right? Or it did to me, of how do I actually get started? And Kyle made a very valid point of a lot of this stuff doesn't just impact, the neurodivergent. It's really just leadership in general, right? And everybody can benefit from it. But if it specifically helps this group, why not? So Kyle, take it away. You can probably.
Fantastic. Let's all give some snaps or something to Marissa. Thank you for that. And now, Kyle, I hope what you're going to say is really different and really profound.
It was not. No, I was just, it was that, Renee's comment about, doing these practices is inclusive to everyone. So, yeah, sorry, I don't have anything additional.
I'm totally kidding. That's perfect. Thank you both for being willing. Renee, thank you for your time. Everybody, thank you for your time. We'll also send out the recording. So you'll get the recording and the PowerPoint. Thank you for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.